The members who worked on this analysis are Kate Ornelas, who did electrical bus research, Jacob Weiner, who did hybrid bus research, and Philip Baggerman, who worked on natural gas bus research. And within all of our research compiled, we created an analysis.
So the purpose of this presentation is just to provide a brief overview over the research topics that you guys requested for us to research into. So we're going to do that by organizing it as the following. We're going to start out with CITYTRANS research request, which is just going to be what you guys asked us to research specifically. We're going to follow that with a research collection overview. This is just going to go over the criteria all of our sources needed to have to be included in our data, as well as what we researched specifically. Then we're going to get to the actual research, where we're going to cover electric buses, hybrid buses, and natural gas buses. We're going to have a technical description as well as a parts list for each of these. And then we're going to go into analysis, where we're going to talk about the cost, emissions, and safety of each of the bus types altogether. And then using this analysis, we're going to provide our recommendations and conclusions.
The situation CITYTRANS was facing was an aging fleet of buses that were approaching their lifespan and were looking to replace them in the future. They needed a detailed information on each of the bus options that they thought were the best fit, which were electrical, hybrid, and natural gas, so that they could be prepared for future options, but had no specific date for replacement. Their next step was researching all the information, but not purchasing just yet. The bus options CITYTRANS identified based on their own research was electrical, hybrid, and natural gas, and they have hired our agency to provide an unbiased, neutral assessment of all three options.
Okay, and now we're going to be looking at how we collected research overall for each of the energy types. So the criteria that we decided to follow is to make sure that every source was verifiable and also credible. That way we made sure that all the facts that we gathered and presented were true and they were all factual. And the criteria is we made sure to cover a technical description for each of the types of energy. And we also made sure to include the costs, the emissions, and the safety to make sure that we provided everything that was needed.
The first option that was researched was the electric buses. Electric buses run primarily on a battery that stores electricity from the power grid. The bus option replaces the internal combustion engine, usually found in diesel and natural gas gases, with an electric motor. This engine type and form of energy is a great way to achieve reduced carbon emission, satisfy the population of Cityopolis, and is cost effective. The parts that make up the electric bus are the lithium-ion battery that stores the electrical energy and powers the bus, the battery management system to monitor the battery to ensure it's performing correctly and prevents it from overheating or overcharging, the electrical traction motor that converts electrical energy into mechanical force and moves the bus forward, the inverter motor controller that converts direct current into alternating current for the motor, the single speed transmission that transfers the power from the motor to the axle without complex gear shifting, which is very effective for frequent stopping and starting in a city location. The power distribution unit, which is essentially the brain of the bus and directs the electricity to all the parts of the bus. The regenerative braking system that captures energy from the bus decelerating and sends that energy back to the battery to recharge. The DC to DC converter that runs the basic electronic components like the lights of the bus and the doors. The thermal management system that regulates temperature to maintain fuel efficiency. The electric power steering that provides steering assistance. and the charging port where external energy recharges the battery bus. Some of the concepts that are essential to understand the electric bus is the electrical and operational units, which is the regenerative braking that stores kinetic energy during deceleration when the operator presses the brake, and it recharges the battery. The kilowatt per hour describes the energy capacity of a battery, and the kilowatt just describes the power of a battery. The alternating current, AC, periodically reverses the direction of the electric current, and the direct current, DC, is the electric current flowing in one direction. Next, we have the charging and infrastructure. There is 3 types of charging: conductive charging, which uses a wired connection, inductive charging that uses a wireless connection, and pantograph charging that uses an overhead connection. And lastly, the safety and environment. There is thermal runaway, which is a dangerous internal reaction within lithium batteries, and life cycle emission, which evaluates the environmental footprints that something leaves behind. The process of electrical buses: first you have energy being stored, which is the electricity path from the power grid to the bus battery. You have the power conservation, which is energy path from the battery to the motor. Next, after that, you have your electric traction motor, and this is a suitable motor for a transit bus compared to a combustion engine, again, because of the frequent starting and stopping that happens in a city. The regenerative braking, which is the process of converting kinetic energy to energy through, again, braking. And the charging infrastructure, which is, like I explained before, is different charging options, but each one of these charging options do vary in the amount of power they use and the amount of time it takes to charge the battery. To wrap up the electrical buses and tie it all together, this bus option is an effective way to utilize electrical energy without producing excessive emissions. The cost for each bus is around $887,000. The expenses for maintenance and additional costs are in between $76,000 and $128,500. The emissions outputs are less than half the amount of global warming emissions than diesel, natural gas, and hybrid, estimating 1,078 grams per mile, which is pretty good. And lastly, safety precautions must be taken when maintaining electrical buses due to the lithium ion battery that powers the electrical bus, and it's could have thermal runoff.
Okay, so now we're going to be talking about hybrid buses. Hybrid buses are a combination of both diesel and electric powertrains, and it is a type of energy that is able to reduce the carbon emissions, reach certain political regulations, and also satisfy the people of Cityopolis and their requirement to look for cleaner energy resources. Some of the parts that are required for a hybrid bus are listed on the right, and things like the hybrid battery and the hybrid ICE, or inverter, converter, motor, and generator, those are all things that can help provide cleaner energy for what the people of Cityopolis are looking for and what we believe CityTrans is looking for. And now looking into some of the concepts of hybrid buses, we have regenerative braking. What this does is whenever the brakes compress, they're able to take the kinetic energy from the brakes and convert it into electrical energy that can be used to recharge the battery. And another one of the concepts is electric power. And at lower speeds, the electric powertrain is fully utilized, and diesel is only utilized at higher speeds, meaning that through heavy city traffic, you will not have carbon emissions from the diesel engine because it will be shut off, and only electrical power will be used. Some of the processes that we talk about are on the right. One of the main ones is the transit depots, which those are where the buses can be taken to be refueled and recharged. However, they do require a bit of extra labor and time. And now to conclude hybrid buses, basically the encapsulation of what a hybrid bus does is it's able to utilize both electrical and diesel energy to power the bus and to be efficient. Now the cost for these buses is around 600,000 ballpark, and some extra expenses that go into things like maintenance and the transit depots like we talked about can be anywhere from midpoint $250,000. The emissions, however, estimate about 2,212 grams per mile is one of the estimates, and a regular diesel engine generates about 3,000. So that's already at least an 800 gram decrease that we see. And the safety that must be taken when maintaining these buses includes flooded engines and flooded batteries that can cause electrical shocks. But other than that, the hybrid bus is pretty safe.
So now we're going to talk about natural gas buses. Natural gas buses work by burning CNG, compressed natural gas, in a combustion engine. Natural gas vehicles are a good option when we're considering fuel cost efficiency, lower emissions than straight diesel buses, and low-cost refueling stations. A parts list for a natural gas bus would include a battery, an EMC, electronic control system, the exhaust system, how the excess fuel exits the vehicle, a fuel filler, where the fuel enters into the bus, a fuel injection system, the system that injects the fuel into the internal combustion engine, a fuel line, how the fuel travels throughout the bus, a fuel tank, this is where the CNG is stored on the bus, a high pressure regulator, this is where the high pressure gas that comes from the fuel tank is turned into low pressure gas that can go into the engine. The internal combustion engine, this is where the combustion happens, where we convert the chemical energy of the fuel into mechanical energy to run the bus. We have a manual shutoff. This is located along the fuel line, and this can be manually activated to prevent any more fuel from reaching the engine. We have the natural gas fuel filter. This is also along the fuel line, and this just removes any excess dirt or oil residue that might be in the fuel before it makes it to the engine. And then we have the transmission. The transmission can use several different gears to take the mechanical energy we get from our internal combustion engine and transport it to the tires so it can move the bus forward. So continuing on with natural gas buses, let's start with our concept list. So CNG is compressed natural gas, and that's just natural gas that has been compressed to a very high pressure. We do this so that we can store more of it in the same amount of space. Chemical to mechanical energy conversions. Chemical energy is just the energy associated with the bonds between atoms. Whenever we break those bonds, that energy is released, and in an internal combustion engine, we can collect that as mechanical energy. Combustion is just the process that happens in our internal combustion engine where we burn fuel, break those chemical bonds that releases the energy that we then later on collect. In our process description, let's first talk about the bus operation. So fuel comes in through the fuel filler. Once the fuel enters in through the vehicle, it goes into a CNG storage tank. So this tank is where the natural gas is stored at a super high pressure, again for packing purposes, until it's ready to be used by the vehicle. Once we want to use it, we take it out through the fuel line, and it first passes through a fuel shutoff valve. So this is just the manual shutoff valve that if you want to provide maintenance to the vehicle, or in case of an emergency, you can shut this off and it will stop fuel from making it to the engine for, again, like I said, maintenance or in case of emergency. After we get through the shutoff valve, it goes through a reducing valve. This valve just takes the super high pressure, the CNG, and turns it into normal pressure that can be used by the engine safely. Passing through this, it continues on through the fuel line and eventually will make it all the way to the engine. It goes into the engine through the fuel injector. Once in the engine, we're collecting both a bit of gas as well as a little bit of air from the outside. This mixes together in a cylinder inside of the engine. And once we've got it mixed in there, a spark ignites from the spark plug and creates a small explosion inside of the cylinder. This combustion, this explosion, pushes a piston in the cylinder up. and that's how we're collecting that energy as mechanical energy through the motion of that piston. It's also worth noting that we have an EMC that kind of detects what's going on in the engine and makes small adjustments to the amount of fuel being injected into it to optimize efficiency and make sure that everything is operating safely. Once we get energy from the engine, we go on to power transfer. And so power transfer is just when that energy makes it all the way to the transmission, and the transmission can use its different gears to send the energy to the tires to allow the truck or the bus to move along. And it uses the different gears to optimize this for different settings that you want to be on. If you're accelerating, decelerating, if you're going up a hill, or if you're just trying to coast along, the gears are what allow you to do that. And then the exhaust system, any excess fuel that was not burned is sent out through the exhaust pipe, but before it goes through there, it goes through the three-prong catalyst, and this catalyst kind of just converts some harmful chemicals that might be in there, like carbon monoxide, into less harmful chemicals like carbon dioxide before it's released into the environment. So it just helps a little bit with emissions. And then it's also worth noting that there is an electrical system through the battery, and while the truck itself is operating on natural gas, the battery is what powers the lights on the dashboard, the lights on the front, and it also is what kind of kickstarts the whole thing whenever you start the bus. And so that battery is also recharged while the engine is running. Some of the power from the engine is redirected to the battery to make sure that that stays fully charged. Okay, process description for the fueling station. So for this one, you get natural gas from a utility place. It first passes through a utility gas meter. This meter just keeps track of how much gas you're getting from the utility place so that they can bill you the right amount. It just keeps track of the amount you're buying from them. Once it goes through there, it passes through a gas line into a dryer. The dryer removes any moisture that might be inside of the gas. This is so whenever you compress it down into CNG, if there's any water in it, it will freeze, and that's not what you want. So you got to make sure you remove all the moisture first in the dryer. Excuse me. It will then pass on to the filter. The filter is just similar to the one that's on the actual bus itself, and that removes any dirt, any oil residue to make sure the gas is as clean as possible. We move on to step 2 in the gas compressor. This is just where the natural gas turns into CNG, compressed natural gas. And again, this is for packing purposes. It leaves the compressor and goes into buffer storage. Buffer storage is just so we can have a buildup for when a vehicle comes. We're able to right away start giving it fuel. Whenever we're giving it fuel, there is one last thing it goes through, and that is the temperature compensation. So whenever we compress the natural gas, it increases its temperature temporarily, and this can mess with how much space it takes up. So whenever we're sending it in, it might be at a higher temperature, and then once it's in the bus, after a time, it starts going to a lower temperature, and that's going to affect how much space it takes up inside of our fuel tank. So the temperature compensation just keeps track of the temperature of the gas going in and makes sure that we're not sending in so much to fill the tank. We're sending in the right amount so that whenever the temperature becomes back to that of normal, we have the right amount inside of the tank. So just to summarize, natural gas buses on the 3 points requested by CT. The cost of each bus is around $500,000. The upfront cost of the infrastructure ranges from about $400,000 to $800,000, and the annual maintenance cost ranges from $100,000 to $300,000. If, however, you would like a more exact kind of price estimate, the U.S. Department of Energy provides a calculator where you can put in all of your exact variables for the company, and it will give you a much more accurate cost estimate for converting everything to CNG. That Vice calculator is linked in our analytical analysis document. For emissions, CNG buses release carbon monoxide at a rate of 1.9 grams for every kilometer driven. This is, again, lower than a straight diesel bus, but it might not be lower when compared to the buses and the rest of the buses in this presentation. For safety, it looked like y'all requested for us to research into 2 types more specifically, and that was vehicle crashes and CNG storage. So for vehicle crashes, those can be a safety hazard because once the vehicle crashes, there may be damage to the storage tank. And if you have a leak, then compressed natural gas is leaking into the air. And if it combusts, it can cause an explosion, and that can be very dangerous. Luckily, CNG is lighter than air, so if there's a leak in an open space, it's very likely that it'll just float up and cause emission problems, but it'll be out of harm's way for the people around. However, if you're in an enclosed space, it may start to collect, and that can be where it gets really dangerous. If you notice a rotten egg smell, it's very important that you report that to any first responders that are there. It's also important that whenever there's a vehicle crash, even if you smell something or don't smell something, you immediately tell first responders that are there that it is a CNG vehicle. Also note that CNG is stored at extremely high pressures, so that can also cause some safety issues. Our analysis of the cost of each bus type yielded the following results. So you can see our table that provides the upfront cost, the maintenance on an annual basis cost, and the price for each bus for the electric, hybrid, and natural gas buses. This data shows that while hybrid has the lowest upfront cost, the electrical bus systems have the lowest maintenance cost, and so over time they will be the least expensive on that front. However, the price per bus, the lowest price per bus is natural gas buses. So just to look at what costs look like over time, we created this diagram here. So this kind of shows how the total price of each bus type will be affected over the course of 14 years. This diagram does not include the price for buying each bus, so that's not taken into account. This is just the upfront cost followed by the maintenance cost. And as you can see, while electric buses are the most expensive at the start, over time they become the least expensive of all of them.
Now we're going to take an analysis of emissions, and it's pretty easy to see quite quickly that the full electric and the battery choice is the least emission prone, and it's going to be best for global warming and what the people of Cityopolis want. The hybrid buses themselves, they produce a lot less, but when you compare it to battery and the electric motor, it isn't really comparable. The diesel to natural gas diesel hybrid, it's a very slim margin in which we see a decrease, but once we go to battery and electric is where we see a significant drop off, and that is we take into account with our recommendations why we might feel that electric is the way to go. And next, we're going to analyze the safety of each of the vehicles. First, let's start off with natural gas. Natural gas is quite safe. However, it does become dangerous when a leak is sprung in the tank because natural gas in itself, kind of like a home appliance, when you get that rotten egg kind of smell, it can be very dangerous to breathe in. And when this is released into the air, while it is a lighter gas and it will rise up more towards the atmosphere, it does still leak and can be breathed in by people around, which is why it can be seen as dangerous. Hybrids have a high voltage system where they deal with the electrics, and this can be dangerous if the engines are flooded. Same thing with electrical. The difference between hybrid and electrical is electrical does not have a diesel engine, and it is a more safe and cleaner form of energy when we look at electrical compared to hybrid. Now, after looking over all of our analysis, we can now come to a recommendation for what we believe is the best option for CityTrans and the people of Cityopolis. Looking at our table, we can see that electric scores the best on emissions and safety, which is some of the most important things when it comes to what the people of Cityopolis want, especially the emissions. They want a clean form of energy, and the cleanest form of energy we can find is electrical. Cost-wise, cost can be overlooked because being that it is the cleanest form and it'll satisfy the people of Cityopolis, we do not have to do more extensive research or spend more money into looking for alternative resources, which we would have to do with hybrid and natural gas since they wouldn't reach the wanted amount for the people of Cityopolis. And in terms of lifespan, it when we look at the efficiency and also the safety and the emissions level, the lifespan can be overlooked because again, we won't have to spend more money on, especially with a hybrid, we have to do charge and gas as well. And natural gas's lifespan is the worst out of the three. So when you take all this into account, we believe that the best option for City Transit Cityopolis is the electrical powertrain, being that is the safest, the cleanest, and also the most efficient.
This concludes our presentation. We have been able to complete the progress report, analytical report, and now presentation for CITYTRANS and the request for research involving the 3 bus energy types. We recommend the electric bus for CITYTRANS benefits and needs, and we will continue to further research and expand for CITYTRANS benefits if it need be. Please feel free to contact us with any additional questions. Thank you.